Hello, and welcome to Taking the Fear Out of Open, encouraging students to embrace renewable assignments. My name is Nicole Jobin, and I am an associate teaching professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm an historian, an administrator of a first-year residential academic program, and I create open educational resources. To help you understand why I was interested in talking about taking the fear out of open, I'd like to have you come with me on an open educational journey. This journey charts my discovery of open educational resources to thinking about open pedagogy and open assignments, moving from the disposable assignment, something students just throw away, to renewable assignments where students are contributing to the commons. Like many of you, I probably first heard about OER mainly in the context of saving students money on textbooks. In secondary education and graduate schools across the country, the cost of texts is a topic of concern. How many books there are, how much does it cost the students, and is this an equity issue? While the conference presentations I heard on this subject were really important, they were a gateway into a whole different world, which went beyond the resources themselves. So having heard about these resources, the first thing I did was to go look and see what could be used in the classes I was teaching. What kinds of open educational resources were there for teaching European history? I gathered a few resources together, started assigning them to my students, and felt good about the fact that I was saving them money. But this is a kind of rabbit hole. Once you get involved in open educational resources, you start hearing about other things relating to open education, open pedagogy. What kinds of works could be created or co-created with your students? What kinds of practices happen in the classroom that are different because you've embraced the idea of open education? This got me thinking, what's out there that I could do that would be interesting? Probably one of the most memorable quotes I ever heard on this topic comes from David Wiley. And this is about the so-called disposable assignments, the way most of us teach, or at least taught, for a long time. David Wiley wrote that these are the assignments that students complain about doing and faculty complain about grading. They're assignments that add no value to the world. After a student spends 3 hours creating it, a teacher spends 30 minutes grading it, and then the student throws it away. Not only do these assignments add no value to the world, they actually suck value out of the world. I heard this quote actually kind of out of context. I didn't read the article or the blog post that David Wiley wrote first. I heard it in a presentation, but it really caught my imagination. Of course, if you're going to get rid of disposable assignments, you need to replace them with something. And Stacy Katz and Jennifer Van Allen have a definition here of what that is. Renewable assignments, as opposed to disposable assignments, are defined as tasks in which students compile and openly publish their work so that the assignment outcome is inherently valuable to the community. So I began to think about these types of ideas. What could my students create that would last beyond a class? How could they perhaps contribute to the commons, the knowledge commons? What kinds of things would they like doing? I read up about blog posts, podcasts. I read about professors assigning editing Wikipedia pages to their students or having them annotate open educational resource textbooks. I read about creation of infographics or even having students contribute to writing a new open educational resource text. All those ideas were really exciting, but they also kind of were scary. Frankly, this whole thing about taking the fear out of open isn't just about the students. Some of these things seemed like they were way too big to do for one person, or even, one person with several helpers. However, I thought about it and came up with a few ideas. I think my first plan was maybe a blog post or two. I also started a page where students could contribute to a historical atlas. The idea was to do some smaller assignments that would allow students to create something that could potentially be contributed to by later classes, and over time would create a resource. Interestingly, when I first brought these ideas to my students, I was so excited. I came into the classroom and said, "We're going to create OER. Isn't this great?" And they all kind of looked at me like, huh? The problem is, once I described it a little bit more clearly, that they were going to be creating something to put on the web, the reaction I got was this. Oh no, this fear of what was this going to mean for them. I got a lot of resistance and a little bit of a trepidation and a few shrugs and sighs. Sure, some students were excited, but there was a lot of feelings that were not excitement in that classroom. Which of course leads me to the question, why are students afraid? What was going on with this class? Actually, 2 or 3 classes I tried one semester to try and get them into doing things in the open. Of course, the best way to find out is to ask the students themselves. And so when I sat down and talked to them about this assignment and why it seemed like nobody was that excited, this is what they had to say. "I'm not an expert. You want me to publish something on the web? That seems kind of crazy. This is not my field. I'm not a historian. I'm a mathematician. I don't want to be judged by this. What if I get something wrong? This seems like a lot of work. Why can't we just write a paper? You know, sounds nice, but I'm not a public person. I don't want to put my stuff out there." These were the kind of responses from the students that were feeling anxiety about actually creating something and putting it out there in the open. What I realized after talking to students and listening to these concerns is that I had to figure out a way to address this. So the rest of today's presentation is about how we can overcome that fear. I've got 3 basic strategies for taking the fear out of open. These are strategies that partially come from my own experience of trying to work through how to do an open assignment in the first place, partially from what actually happened in my classroom, and partially from reading a lot of literature on open pedagogy. My ideas are that we can reduce fear first by giving students knowledge. Tell your students why you care about OER. What's the purpose of doing it this way, as opposed to just the same old assignment? Give them knowledge by helping them to define OER, open pedagogy, the 5 R's, Creative Commons, and Creative Commons licensing. Once they have that kind of knowledge, maybe they'll make a better decision or make a good decision for themselves, even if it's not the one I want, about whether or not they want to participate in putting something in the open. Second thing is, give students choice. Invite students to share their work. Don't mandate it. Don't make them feel cornered, essentially. Give them options about authorship and maybe even the kind of contribution they make to the commons. Finally, provide them with lots of examples. Examples of OER can help give them a sense of what's out there and what's possible, but also that it's doable for them. Be an example as well by sharing your own Creative Commons license work. So I'm going to talk about these 3 strategies in a little more depth. First, this quote comes from the work of Cynthia Mari Orozco, and it's about giving students knowledge. This comes from an article or a book chapter that she wrote called Informed Open Pedagogy and Information Literacy Instruction in Student-Authored Open Projects. This appears in a OER text, Open Pedagogy Approaches. Basically, Cynthia Mari Orozco focuses on students' need to understand the intent behind open projects and on the personal investment students make when choosing to contribute to these projects. She wrote that open practice is only powerful when the students involved understand why they are engaging in this work and deciding for themselves that this is something they are personally and politically invested in. It is only when students understand the concept of open and their own rights as authors that they can ethically engage in this type of open pedagogy. And I have to say, I don't entirely agree with everything in her work. She talks about this as being a political act, and I think it can be. But I also think that for some of the beginnings of working in the open, students need to know some of the background, but maybe won't see it as exactly a political choice. At any rate, giving them more knowledge about the process, giving them more knowledge about where open educational resources come from and why the movement got started can certainly help give them some empathy about why they might want to participate. So these three activities here are me working out how to give students knowledge in practice. One is to assign materials about OER, copyright, Creative Commons licenses, their use. There are so many great resources that the OER community has created, and many of these can be found to include in your course resources, whether it's online or in person, using a course management system. There's lots and lots of different videos and articles and infographics out there. Second, have students contribute to a pros and cons discussion, whether online or in person, about OER and their use. By talking through the issues, maybe students get a chance to voice some of their concerns and hear about possible solutions to those concerns, or possible reasons why maybe those concerns are not as scary as they thought. Finally, assign students a topic related to your course and ask them to research existing OER in the topic. I find that this helps do two things. It gets them out there looking and trying to figure out what OER are, but also it tells them what's not out there. Where are the spaces where they could create something new if they were interested in it? Also, is the stuff that's out there just way too complicated or maybe just not interesting enough? What are the spaces in which they could contribute something unique? Remind them that they might be beginners with this material, but that's an advantage. And this is a way to kind of get them to think about that. My second strategy was to give students choice. And this work of Stacy Katz and Jennifer Van Allen, evolving into the open framework for collaborative design of renewable assignments, also in open pedagogy approaches. This work really is a wonderful work that helps people take traditional assignments and think about how they could turn them into renewable assignments. They go through a framework and several steps in that framework of how to get from disposable to renewable. Step 4 in the process is to design intentional negotiations for openness. I really like that phrase, intentional negotiations. It reminds us that this is not a top-down pyramid with me, the professor, the instructor, telling all the students down below me exactly what to do and how to do it. This is about conversation, which is really something kind of different and unique and wonderful about open pedagogical approaches. Seeing students as co-creators of knowledge and part of the conversation about how that knowledge should come about. They said that we felt like that being invited as opposed to being mandated or directed was an important piece for students. Because open pedagogy is designed to empower students as creators, they need agency in making the decision to share openly, and if they choose to share openly, determining how they will share their work under a Creative Commons license. So for me, choice in practice looks like this. I try to give students choices in how to contribute to the assignments, not just sort of, do you want to do it or not? Because it is a class and they still need to do certain things in order to learn. But I give them choices about, here are our learning objectives. Pick your modality. How would you like to contribute to this assignment? Would you like to write a piece? Would you like to create an infographic? Would you like to make a recording that could be included on our site? One of the things that I do with a lot of my assignments is give students the idea that they're all contributing to a whole. And so I use WordPress a lot, or things like ArcGIS story maps. There's lots of different ways to do this, but giving students choices about what they include or what piece they're going to include in a project that's created by the class as a whole gives lots more choice about modality. Second, I give students choices about if their work is made public or not. Just because I've created a WordPress site for a class does not mean that every student has to hit publish when they've created their WordPress page. Going back to those conversations and getting that knowledge about Creative Commons licenses, some students may just choose, you know what, I'm still a very private person and I don't want to do this. That's okay. Sometimes it's disappointing because I might get a class of 20, 25 students and only have 5 or 6 that actually wanted to publish the end piece of their work. But that's all right. Getting those other students creating, getting them into the process and part of the process for me is just as important, if not more so, than coming out with a set number of finished products at the end that students wanted to have go into the public commons, the knowledge commons. So I always give students choice about whether or not the work is made public, even though everyone has to do the work. So definitely pick platforms that allow you to keep some things private and make some things public, if that's your goal. Third, I try to give students choices about claiming authorship. Some students are perfectly happy to create something and put it out there as long as they don't have to put their name on it. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but there's a good reason that some students might not want to put their name out there. We don't know the background of what kind of privacy issues there might be, so don't pressure students to claim authorship. One of the ways you can do that is by setting things up so that they could write or post or contribute anonymously. That creates some problems with licensing, but another way to do it would be to allow them to create a pseudonym and publish that way. Basically, that conversation dovetails with the last piece, which is giving students choices about the license they choose to apply. Once they've decided they do want their work to be made public and to enter the commons, they have to make a good informed choice about that license. The final point here of my 3 strategies is about giving students examples. And here I'm returning to the work of David Wiley. Even though I heard that first quote in a presentation, of course I went back and looked him up later and found What is Open Pedagogy? His 2013 blog post at Improving Learning, Eclectic, Pragmatic, Enthusiastic. In a section titled An Example of Open Pedagogy, Wiley talks about the need for establishing trust with students, giving clear directions, and providing good examples when designing renewable assignments. He then provides an example of an assignment that asks students to revise and remix core instructional materials that are also OER for the class. David Wiley wrote, "Show a variety of worked examples. If this is the first time you're using this valuable assignment, use the OER that you've compiled to support student learning as your examples. If you have existing student work that you can show, even better." So for me, what this looks like in practice is using examples that students find themselves. Going back to that assignment or example I gave about knowledge, if I've asked students to go out there and look for what's already out there on a particular topic related to class, I might then ask them to pick one and describe how they might remix or reuse the item. They don't have to actually do it in this first phase. They just need to talk about it. What would that look like? Imagine, do a little brainstorming. Another way to give them an example is to have them sort of work along with you or see a worked example. In my case, I usually do an example of the assignment, either right alongside the students or kind of one step ahead. So I'll tell them as they're picking their topics or as they're starting the assignment, I'll tell them the one topic that I'm going to do. And then I record myself doing each step of the process, posting those to our Canvas site, to our LMS, Learning Management System site. By helping students see that I'm working through this along with them, I think it gives them an example they can follow about how you might go about it. I don't mean it to restrict them, but I mean it to give them confidence that they can see me working through the same issues that they're working through and have an example at the end. Finally, of course, you can share examples from past students for similar assignments, or better yet, have students add to or remix on top of past student assignments. One of the reasons I chose to do a historical atlas as one of my open educational resource projects with students is because I envisioned the idea that we would have pages added to and remixed as time went on. While that hasn't completely gotten off the ground yet, I now have a couple classes under my belt, and I can see the shape of this starting to emerge, where students can take something that has already been created and potentially create a new version or add to it. Ultimately, someday we might actually have a text of all student-created pages in this atlas. Now, some of these practices sound big and complicated. It probably depends on how big an idea you have for a renewable assignment is. But you can use these same strategies for little beginner assignments. You can use them for big class projects, digital humanities projects, or big semester-long projects that your students are engaging in. Whether it's little or large, these strategies for taking the fear out of open should help. So by giving students knowledge, you've given them confidence and maybe help them to buy into the process. By providing them with choice, you give them agency and you respect their autonomy. And providing examples and working alongside them, you reduce anxiety and hopefully model what you want to achieve. Here's some final considerations. Whatever projects you do that relate to renewable assignments as opposed to disposable assignments, start small. You can't necessarily rewrite every assignment in your class the first time you do it. And as you do each new assignment, you learn from it and can build upon it. Second thing, embrace the messiness. This is not a process where you get a beautiful finished product the very first time out. In fact, it's taken me a while to realize from that very first time when I wondered why students were afraid to now where I've done this for a few years, that no time that I've ever taught a class with renewable assignments has it not been somewhat messy. But the messiness is part of the process, and the process is learning. Third one, gather feedback and reflections. Remember I said this is a conversation, or one of the things I like about open education is the fact that it's not all top down. By gathering feedback and reflections from students on what went well, what didn't go well, each time I'm getting better at how to do this with the next group of students. You can even have students write a letter to future students in the same class. Hey, when you get to this project, here's some things you should know. It's a way that they can reflect on what they've learned, but also feel like they're maybe contributing to the knowledge of the next group of students that will come through your class. Finally, iterate. Every once in a while, I've done something once and thrown it out the window. That wasn't a great idea. But usually what happens is I take those ideas, I take those assignments, and I rework them, just like we're remixing and reusing in the creation of OER. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and that it gives you some things to think about in terms of renewable assignments and how to take the fear out of open. If you're interested in the credits, these are the credits for the slide images. And here are the credits for the quotations and works consulted. I will also post these slides as part of my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you continue to enjoy working in the open.